Imagine being told to wait for your freedom, not for a day, not for a year, but for generations. Imagine explaining to a child why they are not allowed to enter a park just because of who they are. Would you stay silent? Or would you stand up even if it meant going to jail? Today's lesson is about a letter written from a prison cell but powerful enough to shake the entire nation. Letter from a Birmingham jail is one of the most important documents in the history of civil rights. It is not a story with characters and action in the traditional sense, but it carries a deep emotional journey, real struggles, and a powerful message about justice. This letter was written in 1963 during a time when African Americans in the United States were treated unfairly under the law. Segregation separated people based on race, different schools, different buses, different public places. And in many cases, African Americans were denied basic human dignity. When people began protesting peacefully, some leaders criticized them, saying, "This is not the right time." This letter is a response to that criticism. Let us get to know a little about the author. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just a leader, he was a voice of courage and hope. He believed strongly in equality, justice, and nonviolence. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, he followed the idea that peaceful resistance is stronger than violence. He did not fight with weapons, he fought with truth, words, and moral strength. The setting of this story is Birmingham, Alabama, a city known for strict racial segregation. King came to Birmingham to support a peaceful protest movement. These protests included marches, sit-ins, and demonstrations. But instead of being heard, King and many others were arrested. While sitting in a jail cell, King read a newspaper. In it, a group of clergymen, religious leaders, criticized his actions. They said the protests were unwise, the protests were untimely, outsiders should not interfere. King could have ignored them, but instead he chose to respond, and that response became history. Now, let us look at the main characters. Even though this is a letter, we can still understand its key roles. First character, Martin Luther King Jr., the writer, leader, and the voice of justice. Second, the clergymen, critics who prefer peace over protest. Third, the African American community suffering under injustice. Fourth, white moderates, people who agree with justice but oppose action. Part 1. Why is King in Birmingham? King begins calmly. He explains that he is not an outsider. He was invited to Birmingham to help fight injustice. He says something very important. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice. Everywhere. This means if something wrong happens in one place, it affects all of us. He reminds readers that we are all connected. Part 2. The reality of Birmingham. King then describes the harsh truth. Birmingham was one of the most segregated cities in America. There were unfair laws, police brutality, bombings of homes and churches. African Americans lived in constant fear. Leaders tried to negotiate peacefully, but their promises were broken. Nothing changed. This is where the frustration begins. Part 3. The 4 steps of nonviolent protest. King explains that protests are not sudden or careless. They follow a process. First, collect facts to prove injustice exists. Second, negotiate. Try to solve peacefully. Third, self-purification. Prepare to suffer without violence. Fourth, direct action. peaceful protest. Only when all peaceful tasks fail, action begins. This shows that protest is not chaos, it is disciplined and thoughtful. Part 4. Why not wait? This is one of the most emotional parts. People told King, wait for a better time. But King asks, how long could people wait for justice? He explains that African Americans had already waited for over 300 years. He shares painful experiences. Parents being treated unfairly, children asking why they are hated, families being denied basic rights. He describes the pain of explaining to a child why they cannot go to a public park. He describes humiliation, fear, and sadness. And then he says, justice too long delayed is justice denied. Waiting is not harmless, it prolongs suffering. Part 5. Purpose of nonviolent protest. King explains that protests are meant to create tension. Not violent tension but creative tension. This tension forces society to face problems. Without it, people in power would continue to ignore injustice. So, protest is not the problem, silence is. Part 6. Disappointment with white moderates. This is a turning point. King says he is more disappointed with people who say, I agree with your goal but not your methods. These people want peace without justice, prefer order over equality. He calls this negative peace because true peace is not just the absence of conflict, it is the presence of justice. Part 7. Extremism and nonviolence. King is called an extremist. At first he is hurt, but then he reflects. Wasn't Jesus an extremist for love? Wasn't Gandhi an extremist for peace? He realizes being extreme for justice is not wrong. He also warns if peaceful protests are ignored, people may turn to violence. So, non-violence is not weakness, it is the safest and strongest path. The climax comes when King describes the emotional suffering of African Americans. He paints vivid images: children crying, families humiliated, people living in fear every day. This is where the reader truly understands. This is not just politics, this is human pain. And that pain cannot wait. King ends with hope. Even after all the suffering, he believes justice will come, love will win, humanity will grow. He hopes for a future where people are treated equally and prejudice disappears. Now students, let us look at the themes of this lesson. First, justice versus injustice. Laws are not always moral. Unjust laws must be challenged. Second, urgency of action. Waiting delays freedom. Change needs courage. Third, power of nonviolence. Peaceful resistance can transform society. Fourth, moral responsibility. Silence is the face of injustice is also wrong. Fifth, disappointment in moderation. Neutral people can slow down progress. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Justice too long delayed is justice denied. Freedom is never voluntarily given, it must be demanded. Now, I want you to think deeply. Would you follow a law if you knew it was unjust? Why do people choose silence over action? Can true peace exist without justice? Write your thoughts in the comments, discuss with your friends, and most importantly, stand for what is right. Because history is not changed by those who wait. It is changed by those who act. Students, if you have understood this explanation, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, Comment below your thoughts and share it with your friends. Thank you for watching.